Okay, everybody. Well, welcome. This is our first Monday webinar, and um, and thanks for all of those who could attend live, and the rest of you hopefully are viewing this by watching the recording. Um, and I was just sort of discussing a little bit of the background of this course. I've been teaching a wine business approach to learning about wine for about 30 years. And what I found really fascinating is how little the actual business end of things is addressed when people are even in really high levels of wine education. And so you've got all these really expert people that aren't aware that of the ramifications of decisions. It's just, oh, of course, we go through the vineyard and we drop the fruit and lower the yield, and they have no clue whether the person that's sharing this knowledge is telling the truth or not, first of all. And the second thing is not considering the business implications. And so it's been really fun for me, and certainly advanced my knowledge exponentially. So originally we just had some workbooks. Whoops, we're getting some feedback. All right, that sounds good. Oh, we've got you twice, Karen.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to log into the big computer. It's better.
Oh, got it.
Notes.
Right. Yeah. We're on the big computer. I'm gonna mute your other iteration here, I think. Oh, no, never mind. So anyways, so I started to take this approach and developed workbooks, and it was a lot of work trying to do the financials. And then I was on the board of directors for the development of the Cal Poly San Luis Obispo wine program down in the Central Coast, and was working with their faculty. And they decided, well, we'll get graduate students to take all these workbooks and put them into Excel spreadsheets. And that was kind of cool, but if you're like me, I hate Excel spreadsheets, even though my life revolves around them now. And then 7 years ago, I was approached by Sonoma State University to teach their first ever online course of any kind. So I found a way that we could put these workbooks online and become the Wine Biz Sim, these individual workbooks. It all used to be one really complex workbook, but now, as you see, they're broken down individual components. Okay. So to start with, I wanted to first answer a question that was sent in by Ekaterina. She was asking about the cost of goods project, whether it was a fictitious winery or what it is. So the project that you're going to hand in a week from Wednesday is, I'll show you how to download the Wine Biz Sim in a PDF form, and you're just going to email it to me, and then I'll check off. I don't care what it looks like when you send it in. You can just go through and kind of fiddle with the settings. Especially if you're a newbie to wine and you're taking this course just to learn more. So depending on your expertise, all you need to do is just sort of what we call push and pull some levers. See what happens when you change the FOB price. If the price goes up, where could you get it to come back down? Look at the things that can give you a better gross margin, which is going to pay your bills, and it's going to pay your mortgage, and it's going to pay your staff, and it's going to pay you, and it's going to be the bank, if you will, the money that you then get to budget for promotions and marketing and advertising and those kind of things. So at the newbie level, just go in and play with it. Some of you might want to do a case study. So see if you can find a $25 red blend and then say, huh, okay, and find something out of your comfort zone. I've got another class going on with Washington State University right now, and somebody was saying, well, red blends should be Cabernet and Merlot and this and that. No, they shouldn't. In Bordeaux, they should. But certainly that's not going to go very far in the Rhone, where you've got a whole new set of grape varieties. They're not blending Bordeaux varieties in Rioja. They have other varieties. And you're going to find some of the most valuable and successful brands that are out in the market today are non-traditional blends where you create a flavor profile and your marketing story and everything behind it. And then you've got this amazing flexibility to maintain your margins and your profitability from year to year because you have the ability to shop the market for different grapes or for different bulk wines or whatever it is you're using in your blend. And that's the business reality of things. So if you do a case study, find a red blend, see if you can find the region, see if you can research any of the grape prices, even call the winery and ask them how much you guys have to pay for your Zinfandel et cetera, whatever goes into the blend. And you'll be surprised at how willing many of the wineries, they may give you over to somebody in the vineyard department or winemaking or a tour guide or something like that, but it's amazing the kinds of conversations you can have just sometimes picking up the phone and asking, okay? There are other people that are taking this course because you want to start a winery or you've already started a winery and you want to create or you want to improve and optimize your business. So for this project, just do a $25 case study or a dream wine. Maybe you're planning on making a $25 red blend, so you can do that. I think that kind of covers the basis. After this 2 weeks lesson ends, so this is weeks 1 and 2. We're going to do another type of a workbook, which is a wine blending workbook, and we'll just look at production from another point of view, all right? And another decision making. I'll give you all the instructions and everything you need to blend your own wine. You're going to go out and purchase wines off the shelves. I'll give you a formula, and you're going to blend the wines and put in the price of the wines you're blending. I'll give you a little cost conversion thing so that you can see the real way wine is blended, like how do we optimize our profit? How do we make the best use of the materials we have in our winery or that we're buying in the bulk wine market or whatever, okay? Yep.
I have a question on the profitability part. It sounds like, and it makes sense you're saying that the blends can often be the most profitable because you can shop around each year and find like the best cost input. But how big is the range of profitability rate? I mean, I know in the SIM it's starting at around the 8%, but like how big is that range?
Huge. So that's a great question. Okay, so hopefully I answered the question about the projects. And you're not expected to know this stuff. You're expected to learn this stuff over the course of the next 8 weeks. And Tara, your question is perfect. Okay. So when you go into the workbook, it's already set up and there's already some gross margin, right? And FOB to get you at the $25. So see if you can make 50,000 cases. And And then when we go in, see how we can make money hand over fist. And that's how a lot of people go into this business, and this is how they create their wine, and this is their strategy, okay? And so what are the key variables? And tonight we're going to talk about the business of grapes a little bit, and then I've also got another workbook that's optional for anybody who wants to play with it, and that's a vineyard profitability and forecasting workbook. But for this one, let's say we want to make 50,000. Actually, let me go back and let's just work on what we've been kind of discussing here. All right, so this is the way things are set up. And remember, in the grape costs, there's a couple things I'm going to look in your workbook to see if you've found or not. But the first thing is that we've actually set it up that there's a mistake in this, because you can't have 150% of, you know, the total. This part needs to equal 100%. So watch our gross margin when we just make that adjustment. I'm going to put 50% in here and go. Okay. So now we're making almost $100,000, provided we sell all of this wine at an average FOB of 133 bucks, etc. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody know the story of White Zinfandel? Why did White Zinfandel become the thing? Do you know how it was invented?
Mm-mm.
So the story is, and this has value in a couple ways. The story is not the truth. And I've not met anybody who knows the actual truth, except for the people who make it, who I actually know, which is Sutter Home. In the late 70s, Zinfandel was free. Zinfandel grapes, you could get all you want for free. You had to pay for the picking and the transportation, but there was such a bad job of forecasting that incredible acreages were converted over to red Zinfandel grapes, and that the forecasting for, at that time, was not realized, meaning there were thousands of acres of Zinfandel with no contracts and no place to go. So Sutter Home, they tell the story that they were fermenting their Zinfandel, and accidentally it was what's called a stuck fermentation, meaning something happened that had the yeast stop converting, and it left the wine kind of pink and sweet, and it wasn't even dark enough to be called a rosé, so they called it a blush wine. They made 25,000 cases, and it was a hit, and in the ensuing years became the #1 selling wine in the US, okay? So that's the story. And by the way, the French always loved sweet wines. The Spanish, their national drink is sangria. So they put wine with fruit juice. In the Basque Country, they mix Coca-Cola and red wine. It's called a calimocho. So part of what I want you to learn is everybody get off of the crap about French don't like sweet wines, and their market's a mess right now, okay? US has the best market in the world, and France is a disaster. So anyways, if you understand enough about the business of wine and production, you can look at the story that's being told about how White Zin was invented, and it doesn't make any sense. If you start fermenting red Zinfandel grapes and even just leave it for 6 or 8 hours, hardly even beginning fermentation, it's going to be a dark red color. It's not going to be a blush wine. You've got to intentionally take the fresh grapes, press the juice off, get it away from the skins where the color is, and then ferment that separately. Does that make sense? So that's the reality of production. And it's harder to make white Zinfandel. Ask any winemaker that's not too full of themselves. Really expensive red wines made with really great grapes and lots of new oak and all, that's the easiest wine in the world to make, actually. White Zinfandel is technically a real challenge. Hang on just one second, I've got a chat message. Oh, Karen, you should have gotten, this is online. Are you asking about this worksheet that we're looking at right now? Okay, so you should have gotten a login and instructions. It came out in an early email. And if you're having troubles getting this is something for you that's going to be very important. So we'll cover that and make sure you've got what you need. Okay. All right. So what would happen if we were making a wine and we decided we're not going to go with the grapes that command the highest prices and are in the highest demand? And when you guys go out in the stores, when you're trying to find a new bottle of wine for the weekend or something, look for the wacky blends that are non-traditional varieties, that are not the Bordeaux blends, that are not the Rhone blends, and so forth. And what you're going to find is a lot of very successful and highly profitable wines where they'll go in and they'll find that Syrah got overplanted, and there's in some regions it's widely available at really advantageous prices, even as low as $800 a ton. Now, watch what happens when I plug my $800 a ton in, and we're going to look at the gross margin up here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit tab. Wow, we're making about 40% plus more gross margin because we were able to dramatically reduce our grape costs. And we're not going to have no stinking Merlot. We're going to put some Petite Syrah in there, and maybe we can get that for $950 a ton. And then when I hit tab, now watch, we're at $135,000 gross margin. I'm going to hit tab. Ooh, we're making money, you guys. This is your money. If this is your winery, this is in your budgets. This is to give incentives. This is to pay your payroll, to pay your mortgage, and so on and so forth. And so this is the reality of how people create wines and so forth. Now, if you've decided you're going after that classic Bordeaux variety blend market, then obviously you're going to have to conform to that. But there are different strategies and different directions, because often the wine experts and what you learn in the WSET or Society of Wine Educators or blah blah wine courses is a load of crap, and the market might not care as much as you think about the traditional blends. Some market segments will, but others won't. And so look around in the stores and look at wine lists. And if you work what's called the spot market, which comes with a lot of risks, it means you kind of wait till going into summer and you start to look at classified ads for grapes and talk to friends and network and go out and have conversations with growers. The spot market means you're going to wait till the last minute. And so sometimes we could say, wow, these guys have Zinfandel that's really good, and they only need $300 a ton. All right. So I'm going to plug this in, and then what I'm going to change, can we now make a blend that would have the flavor balance and characteristics that we're looking for, that our market would expect for this wine? And then we're going to change our blend because we just found really inexpensive Zinfandel, and we're going to make this only 20% of our blend, and we're at $156,000 gross margin right now, and we're going to change our blend around so that this is going to be 50%, and then we need to get this down so this would be 30%, and we're making virtually twice as much margin as we were with our classic Bordeaux blend. And so at that $25 price point, now how do you create the story around this blend? How do you get it in front of the consumers? How do you get it out into the competitions to win medals and that kind of stuff? And we've got a much bigger amount of money up here at the top to budget for our marketing dollars and for telling that story and for incentives for distributors and distributor salespeople, et cetera, et cetera. Okay?
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
I had two questions around that. One was just, how much transparency is there generally in the grape buying market? I know you're mentioning you wait till last minute on the spot market, potentially it's a little higher risk, but just on an ongoing basis, like how easy is it and how transparent is it to find out the cost of grapes?
Well, that's a great question. So it's relatively transparent, and especially if has anybody looked at the California Grape Crush report yet?
Yeah, a little bit.
So the California Grape Crush report is every legal transaction for grapes in the entire state of California for the year of the report. So let me show you. Well, we're going to go through that in a minute, and we'll go into the Grape Crush report. But I think in 2017, they haven't finished the 2018 report yet. In 2017, the lowest price paid for Napa Cabernet Sauvignon was $1,000 a ton, and the highest price was $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that stuck out for me too. That was a lot.
and then go see why Lodi and the Sierra foothills and the Central Coast and Mendocino becomes such an incredibly attractive alternative. And again, now as you're creating your strategy for this, how important is it to say Napa or not? How important is it if it just says California? And if you want to do a case study, do Conundrum that's made by the Caymus family, but it's been disassociated from Caymus. And they started with leftovers that was a combination of Moscato and Chardonnay and Viognier and Sauvignon Blanc and whatever. They left some residual sugar in it. It sold for $7.99 a bottle, and it was literally made out of leftovers in the winery. They just said, well, let's put this all together. They sold it in the tasting room. People loved it. They started then selling it through distribution. It exploded. They disassociated it from Napa, so it just read California, so that they were able to grow the brand. And it went from a $7.99 Napa wine to a $25 California wine, and it's a freaking cash cow. And now it's its own standalone brand, and it's over 250,000 cases a year. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. And this is also why a lot of people will determine, okay, well, we're going to have two blends. We're going to do a higher end reserve that might be classic varieties, but then we're going to do a table wine that we're going to do in a much higher quantity, but is actually going to be, you know, the cash cow that feeds our bottom line and pays our salaries and bonuses and that kind of stuff. So one of the places to go look, let me take you there. If you go to winebusiness.com, whoops, if I could spell, I'd be better off. So go to Wine Business Monthly, all right? I recommend everybody, and I think it was in the original video, go here and then find the classified ads, all right? And here's classified ads, all right? If you are looking for a job, they've got job postings, and you can sort of look in and see what kind of jobs are available, what are people looking for, what are the job descriptions, those kind of things, all right? But you can also go to grapes and bulk wine, which I'm going to do now. Obviously, there's not much available in terms of grapes, or there shouldn't be, but you'll find lots and lots of bulk wines, and at prices that range from $12 a gallon to $60 a gallon and more. And as you get more and more into harvest, you'll find, depending on supply and demand, you'll find more or less last-minute grapes available. Because here's the rub. Let's say that we're gonna try and use the spot market and leverage that. It could be that if something happens in the vintage, or if you're in a high demand cycle, you might be left out to dry and there's no grapes to buy. In an oversupply position is when brands are started, but you've got to have the business plan so that you can ensure that year after year that you can maintain a certain amount of profitability and quality and so forth, right? So later, you'll be able to go into grapes and search. And basically, this is people that don't have a contract for their fruit, and they're hoping to get an early contract. And as the year goes on, you might see this price for Jackson County, Oregon Pinot Gris from Umpqua Valley. It's at $1,400 a ton. Well, come August, September, it could be $300 a ton, right? And here's Cabernet from Napa for $7,300. And so you can see the prices are just all over the place. And so this is part of negotiation of grape prices and how it all fits in profitability, okay? All right, does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So any questions on the workbooks? Karen will get you set up and make sure that you've got what you need to get into these. Does anybody have any specific questions about playing around?
I missed so you kept referring to the bottles as being $25 a bottle. Is that what you actually plugged in here?
So what we've got is on this workbook comes pre-filled out.
$133 for a case.
And okay. That's what the winery sells a case of wine for.
Okay.
And that's before it goes to a distributor, and the distributor has to pay for shipping and taxes, then they mark it up, and then they sell to a restaurant. And we'll go through all of those computations separately.
Got it. Thank you.
And so one of the numbers, though, this is called a stepper, where we have this price. And so you can see right now we're looking at an estimated about $25 a bottle based on a $133 FOB. All right. So that means that we're selling the wine for about 11 bucks, and by the time it gets on the store shelf, it's at about 25 bucks.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Now,
cool.
if we increase this, if we increase our FOB, it's going to increase our margin, but then it's going to increase our estimated selling price. So watch as I step this up. So let's say that we wanted to make our wine $29.99. So you can see how far can we go, and there we are. We're at 30 bucks. And wow, look at what that difference makes. But we've got to figure out, we've got to raise the price of our wine $5 a bottle on the shelf. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Okay. And so then one of the other things that we could do, we could say, you know what, we really want this bottom line, but where else could we go? So let's go into production. And our conversion rate is, we're estimating that from 1 ton of grapes, we're going to get about 60 cases. What if we squeeze just a little bit harder? And notice our margin is continuing to go up. So we could actually then go back, and if we had a really great pneumatic press, we made that investment, we can get more yield. Now, in really high-end reds, they're only getting 50 cases per ton. If you're making a botrytis wine, a late harvest botrytis Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc, you may only be getting 25 or 30 cases per ton because the grapes have molded and evaporated a lot of the water off. Okay. So these are the things to play with on your project. Okay.
Do you have any, is there ultimately a cheat sheet in terms of, for some of these things, what a credible range would be?
I say that once again, I'm getting a little breakup when you talk.
Oh, sorry. So I was just asking if there's any kind of best practices or guidance for some of these things in terms of, you might expect anywhere from 40 to 60 cases per ton in general and things like that.
No. That being said, we've kind of set up all these fields with relative benchmarks. Okay. So when you see the 60 in here, you can consider that that's sort of a baseline. And then if you want to read more about conversion, then go on to Google and just do wine press number of cases conversion. And for anybody in Master of Wine program or looking to really thoroughly understand this, then what you're really going to want to look at is articles where you can find best practices and different opinions on this kind of a topic. So as an educational device, that's how to use these workbooks. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So and also on the discussion forum. So if there's anything in here that you don't understand or that you'd like to discuss further, we're not yet getting much action on the discussion forum, but make sure that you're signed up for that. And then you could say, hey, what are kind of the different opinions on yield from the crusher? And that goes for all of these areas. Okay. So we're talking about this really essential set of decisions that's constantly which way do I go? And in one direction, I'm making a decision for quality and the characteristic of the wine and tradition or whatever it is. But on the other hand, you need to, it's a business. You need to operate a profitable business. And these are the yin and yang of winery decisions encapsulated. Where am I going to source my grapes? How much are they going to cost? How stable will that pricing be? And then doing mitigating risk. What happens if? So your contingencies and whatever. And again, this isn't normally what people teach about wine. So that's where we're focusing. Now, a real quick note also for people in the Master of Wine program. I know we've got one person studying it, might be more, but think beyond just red blends and think beyond just still wines. And what goes into making a sherry and the production processes and the decisions they have to make. A wine that with very, very few but notable exceptions that's always blended is Champagne from France. You start with a blend of base wines, you get something, then you're creating your cuvee, and then you're later actually adding back sugar and alcohol and whatever, the dosage. So also try to expand your thinking just beyond still red and white wines or rosé and so forth. Okay, so it's just a sort of a note. All right, so what I wanted to do then is cover the business of grapes. And as everybody's continuing to look at the Grape Crush report and call wineries to see if you can find out how much a winery pays for grapes. If anybody gets a chance to do a winery visit, for example, people living in Calistoga, go to a winery you love and respect and go say, how much you guys pay for your grapes, or how much does it cost you to grow them, okay? And so for the next few days and beyond, think about the business of grapes and also all the related businesses that feed the business of grapes, real estate, banks and investors, legal services, contracts and leases. And in the class section on the Napa Valley Wine Academy site, there's a document posted of what goes into a grape contract. And you can learn so much by reading an actual grape contract to see what kind of things need to be covered and what kind of contingencies and how do you get out of one and all those kind of things. There are vineyard consultants, there's, the land needs to be ripped and prepared and whatever. There's all the hardware and stuff to the posts and trellises and that kind of stuff. Treatments, pesticides, machinery, labor, insurance, harvesting, bins, gondolas, tankers, tanks and trucks and logistics and whatever, all just in the business of grapes, all right? The other thing is differentiating between what we call truth and fertilizer, and fertilizer is just my polite way of saying bullshit. This is a picture from my television screen, or no, I'm sorry, this was, I think, on YouTube. Somebody captured this on their television screen. I had a picture of it myself and lost it. Everybody remember, was it 2015 or 2014, we had the big earthquake in Napa? And Cron 4 TV posted this picture and a video showing how the earthquake knocked the grapes right off the vine. It didn't. This didn't happen. This is crop thinning close to harvest to concentrate flavors and so on. But here's this earnest report by ignorant reporters that didn't double check anything, that were claiming that the earthquake was so bad. I don't think if it knocked grapes off the vine that they would end up neatly in the middle of the rows. And this is when you talk about yield per acre and you talk about what people do in the vineyard, understand that even highly educated wine educators don't know the difference between the truth and the BS, okay? So it's time to take things with a grain of salt. And then also don't forget critical thinking, in that if you're selling grapes, you're looking at this whole business differently than somebody who's buying grapes. A grape seller wants the biggest yield they can get off their vineyard at the highest price. They want the grapes off early. They want to mitigate risk of something happening, birds or frost or rain or whatever. And the grower is asking people to leave the grapes hanging, let it dehydrate, which is money evaporating into the air. And so it's this constant yin and yang between the buyer and the seller. There's old thinking, conventional wisdom, and there's a lot of new thinking, like yield per acre and different practices like green harvesting or the picture before dropping the fruit to achieve a certain result. The difference in perspective between a wine enthusiast, which you may be, and you may be learning business, and an actual wine business person, can be night and day, etc. Okay? So a note on the critical thinking, because this is what we're going to be doing the whole course, and it's actually was an imperative for me to learn when I passed the Master of Wine examination so many years ago, 1990. I'm the old man now. But on the Wine Biz Sim, there are different links and topics, and also in the learning management system. And I'm going to give you guys an exercise so everybody can turn on your microphones if you want. This is an actual Master of Wine question, and I use it to illustrate how wine people close their thinking and stop thinking, all right? So this is an actual Master of Wine question. When is wine a match for food? Can anybody tell me what the most important word in here that's going to set the context, if you were now sitting in the Master of Wine examination and you have to write a clear and comprehensive essay on this topic or this question, what's the most important word?
Match.
Match. Ding, 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 ding. All right. So define the word match, and let's just have fun with this. Tell me how to define the word match.
One way is saying it complements it. It's a compliment.
That's one. By the way, there's about 7 primary definitions for the word match.
Works well together.
Works well together.
Doesn't make it taste funky. Bad.
Is that a definition? Okay. So I'll put you guys out of your misery. Never in the history of doing this with hundreds of people that I've mentored in the Master of Wine examination, one-on-one, in workshops or whatever. So if you walked up to a person on the street, not in a wine business class, and said, what does the word match mean? What would they say?
Commonality.
It's something you use to light a cigarette or a candle. It's a,
Right.
oh. And what else what could the word match mean? It could mean identical. It could be mirror images, right? Identical but opposite, like matching gloves. Anybody like tennis or golf? They have matches. It's a competition. It's, yes, the cliches of wine and food pairing, they go together well, they're complementary, but people stop thinking normally when it comes to wine, and we think in a certain context. I want you during this course and for the rest of your career to stop it and break this crap up. So to actually pass a Master of Wine examination, to get a passing score on this, you would have to say something to the effect, wine is a match for food depending upon how one defines the word match. For example, wine could be a match when wine is the thing that sparks conversation and conviviality. It provides warmth in the room. So wine can be like striking a match. It can strike up a conversation, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wine is a match for food, and often people will say wine is food. And the reason is it was the only available safe form for hydration and as a beverage in many parts of Europe where you couldn't drink the water. So it was an integral part of the table, just as a soup or a salad or a piece of meat was. So it can be said wine is identical to food. Wine is food. Wine can be identical but opposite, since it's a beverage. It's not actually a food substance, but it ad nauseum. And then you just write, you take your 7 definitions, you write paragraphs about each of those. Hang on just one sec, I've got to turn a light on for my UPS guy. Sorry about that. Okay, so anyways, I want you guys to ask questions. I want you to stop and think, why do I think that? Where did that information come? Who told me that? Okay. So in context of what we're doing now, this was an actual question from the Master of Wine exam. How do you extract the best out of a vineyard site? Well, best might be the largest quantity of crap grapes at the highest sugar that you can extract, and those grapes might actually even go to brandy or be sold in France back into the gasohol program, distilled and go into gasoline. That might be the best you can do with a vineyard site. The other best could be Petrus or Opus or Romanée-Conti or Grange, you name it. All right. So this is what critical thinking is. Don't limit your thinking, and it's kind of what we all naturally do. And so one of the other things, a lot of people think, well, if I grow my own grapes, it's better because I'm an estate winery, it's estate bottled, but they never consider that it's very likely those grapes could cost you significantly more than purchasing grapes from a large grower. And that the large grower might be a better grower and you get better grapes. All right. So again, these are the kind of things I want people to break up. Now, what determines cost and profit in a vineyard? Location, location, location. If you're in the Stags Leap district of Napa Valley versus somewhere in Lodi versus somewhere in Fresno versus somewhere in Nebraska, in October, I did the Nebraska Wine Growers Conference, yes, with close to 50 wineries in attendance. And then, so cost and profit are what you can extract in terms of a price per ton, how many tons per acre you can produce, and then with what kind of overhead of debt service and expenses and so on and so forth, okay? So these are the things that go into the business of grapes determining cost and profit. And then that cost to the winery then becomes part of the cost of goods in the processing of the fruit and the making of the wine. And notice supply and demand is one of the big factors. So learning the grape supply chain as a subset of the overall wine supply chain, just for the grapes, identifying a site, negotiating the cost of the property, planning and layout, site preparation, and all the things that go into getting it ready to plant, installing the hardware, the actual vine cuttings and how many per acre and those kind of stuff, cultivating and working the soil, establishing the vines, the trellising system, the canopy. You finally get some fruit, and then after anywhere from 3 to even 7 or even 10 years in some cases, you finally get a crop you can sell, okay? Now, for anybody who cares, this is just an aside, and you can do this on your own time. In spreadsheetserver.com, you can make your $25 red blend. And then what I'm going to do is don't forget how to save your work and so forth. I can save this, and remember that when I want to open a workbook, I've got to go up to my bookmarks up here. Remember that, okay? And once I've saved it, I can go back to the auto filter, and you can create a new workbook. And you could make 200 cases of a $200 bottle of wine if you'd like, or you could try to make $2 chuck if you wanted to try to make 2 million cases of a $2 wine. And you can play around with that as much as you want. But one of the other things that you're going to find in here is a vineyard profit and loss and cash flow calculator. And so for anybody that wants a deeper dive into the business of vineyards, this is, again, similar in its layout, but the inputs and the factors that influence profitability are very different. So just as a quick example, this is my gross margin from my vineyard. I've got about $153,000. If I increase my yield, which I got at 4 tons per acre, watch that money go up. Do you see this going up down here? Right, so at 4 tons per acre, I'm at 153,650. If I step up to 5 tons, I am making an additional $50,000 gross margin from my vineyard. If I'm selling it for $3,000 a ton, but I get stuck in the spot market and I only get $2,000, when I hit, watch my profit go away. I just lost over $100,000. So the yield, how many tons per acre times the price times the acreage gives you your gross margin. And if anybody wants to play with this, it's got a full set of all the expenses for a vineyard. And this is fun just to review, even if you're not going to do much with it. The development costs, how much does it cost to plant a vine or a vineyard, and what are all the considerations? And then finally, a very, very complex and intimidating 15-year forecast of profitability, and when are you ever going to break even, if ever, based on your inputs. Okay, so that's available for anybody who wants. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. So what I just showed you is for anybody who really wants to dig in this more deeply. Don't forget, these workbooks you're going to have access to for a year. So so you'll be able to play with it as much as you like. Now there's lots of other resources. The California Grape Crush reports nearly 200 pages of transactions. The Washington crush report is not quite so comprehensive because they're not required to report the transactions and nobody's compiling the data. But this is a look at what the Washington crush report looks like. And a few things then to note. Grape pricing is negotiable unless you're growing your own, which is another advantage, actually. It's why so many wineries today are opening with no vineyards. And they outsource that to people who can specialize in that, who can spend the money and develop the vineyards and so forth. And it frees up, if I'm deciding, okay, I'm going to start a winery, do I want vineyards? It's a huge decision to make that commitment to the capitalization and buying and, tying up your either your cash or your credit, to make the purchase, to the development, to the many years that it might be till you have fruit. And you might suck at growing grapes. But it's also a big consideration in time and focus and so forth, okay? So in grape pricing, when you're purchasing grapes, it's negotiable. You can shop around unless you're making a single vineyard wine, then you want to have a long-term contract and you want to tie that up. And that's why branding of a vineyard and the value of the grapes is every bit as important for a grape grower selling the grapes to the winery as it is a retail store selling the wine to the consumer, okay? So these are a lot of considerations in grape pricing and different models. And the new model is, if anybody goes into the Grape Crush Report, go to Napa Valley, look at Cabernet Sauvignon, go to the end. And this is the pricing for Andy Beckstoffer for To Kalon, Napa Valley, Cabernet Sauvignon. If you're going to sell your wine for $200 a bottle, you're going to take your selling price times 175, and you're going to pay $35,000 a ton. Okay? All right. So this is a crush report. Let me see if I can open this without it kind of sticking. And when you go into this bad boy, take some time, open it up, and just have a look around. All right. It is kind of a blast, and it's really eye-opening. Hang on, let me hide. Okay. So it is 160 pages of every transaction that took place legally in the state of California. All right. There's a key to how to get around in here, and I think somewhere around page 92 or so, I'm going to try to jump to that. Give it a second and see if it'll find it. I may have crashed my program. Okay, awesome. All right, don't look at the screen for a second. I'll give you a headache, so don't do that. And what we want to do is we want to find District 4. Oh, I way overshot it. Sorry about that. Let me move you guys a second. Is it in the 70s? So what I want to show you here is District 4, and don't look, wait a second. Okay, you can look now. All right. So where we are is page 62, and we're looking at Cabernet Sauvignon, and this is District 4, which is Napa Valley, and that'll be in the top left of the page. And so you can see that there were transactions conducted. Somebody bought 18 tons at $1,000 a ton. Somebody bought 43.1 tons for $1,000 a ton. then all of a sudden we start to go up pretty quickly. But here's somebody that bought a 230 tons for $2,200. And then we're going to follow this page, and it'll go down the left. And remember that we're at District 4, which is the Napa Valley, and there's a map that'll give you the key to this. And we're going to keep going up in price. And now look over on the right, we're up to $6,000 a ton. We're up to $7,000 a ton. We're up to $8,000 a ton. We're up to 9 and 10 and 11 and 15. And we top out at $50,000 a ton, and it was 10 tons. The weighted average per ton for Napa Valley, then Cabernet, is $7,509 a ton. So to answer the question, the prices are all over the frickin' board, okay? And then go into some of the lesser known things and see how inexpensive you can find grape sources. And the art of negotiating grapes and grape contracts is huge. It's unbelievable. It's quite a business, okay? So anyways, that's the Grape Crush report. And then let me go back to our regularly scheduled. Now, I don't know of any other report in the world that's this comprehensive. And if you're in New Zealand or starting in Australia or South Africa winery, if you're in France, it can be really tough to find this kind of data, all right? But you will be able to find things again for Washington, for Oregon, for Virginia, and look at the, what's going on in supply and demand. So this is illustrating Cabernet Sauvignon in 2002, there were about 6,000 acres. And then in 15 years, there's over 18,000 acres. So again, as in any product or commodity, there's supply and demand and things that are pushing and driving availability and pricing and so forth, all right? And as usual, you'll get a PDF copy of this presentation. So don't forget the related businesses and how many businesses service. And then here's another look at the grape prices by variety and in different vineyards, and how much quantity was utilized, and then the average ton. And you can see why, if you're growing, if you're planting a vineyard, this is the kind of data you want to look at, and how can you maximize, and this is why Napa is becoming monoculture. You're stupid not to grow Cabernet from a business standpoint. You're getting $7,500 a ton for average for Cabernet, and maybe Sauvignon Blanc's $3,500 a ton. What would you grow? Okay. Now the other thing is, and this we'll kind of wrap up on real quickly, is more and more grape growers are looking at, well, what if I were to grow my grapes and then have it custom crushed or made into wine? And this was a study done by Sonoma State, and they were showing that if you grew an acre of Chardonnay in Sonoma, you could expect a gross profit per acre of about $8,600, $8,675. If you had that same amount of grapes turned into wine and sold the bulk wine, you would make about a 15% increase on your gross profit. That's pretty compelling. But the real lesson in this, if you're a grape grower and you sell half of the grapes in the grape market and have half of your wine made into bulk wine, look at the difference in bulk wine prices, the dark line, and grape prices. And when the grapes were bottoming out, bulk wine was topping out. So if you had done 50-50 of selling grapes and selling finished wine in the bulk wine market, you would literally have an almost flat cash flow instead of these up and down valleys that you're trying to manage your business around. So we're going to talk about this starting Wednesday, and the bulk wine market, and just like when is wine a match for food, what you may think about bulk wine is usually not what the world of bulk wine is really about. And there's it's a huge business and a huge market. Okay? So here are the main considerations. You can review that when we need, and that will wrap us up for the business of grapes as a subset of what goes into the cost of goods in a finished case of wine. Questions?
Oh, great.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for your attention. And anytime, let's see, I'm going to actually, I've got some travel coming up. In Wednesday, I'm going to post last session's video, so there's no live class on Wednesday, and I'll send a note when I send this out. And then also I'm going to be going to New Zealand at the end of this month, and we'll go from there. And then I'm going to end the share and stop the recording, and then I'm going to stay on with Karen to show how to log in and how to get into the Wine Biz Sim. Okay? All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much, and we'll talk again soon. So I'll stop the recording now. Bye.